front of him, we have 2 clavicle bones that go right here, so you can see. 2 clavicles. We have a sternum. We have 12 on each side ribs. So with the ribs, 1 through 7 are true ribs. They are true ribs because they connect directly to the sternum itself. Ribs 8 through 12 are considered false ribs because they do not actually connect to the sternum. So down here, ribs 11 and 12, these you can barely see, but they're floating ribs because they are almost non-existent. They do not connect to the sternum body at all, not by costal cartilage, nothing. So again, we have the clavicle, we have the scapula on the back, we have the sternum, we have 12 ribs on each side of whatever you choose. And then on the back, we have 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, and 5 lumbar. And then when we move over to the arm, we have the humerus bone, which is the bone of your upper extremity. And then when we get down to the hand, so if they're standing in anatomical position and their thumb is this way, this would be their radius. We know this is their radius by the characteristics of the bone. And this would be their ulna. So radius, I always remember, radius is always on the same side as the thumb. Ulna is always on the same side as the pinky. And so when we're moving down to the hands, you have the carpals. So altogether, you have, you have a good amount, you have carpals, then you have metacarpals, and then you have phalanges. And in your phalanges, you have proximal, intermediate, and distal phalanges. But for right now, we're just going to get into the basics, which is you have your radius, your ulna, your carpals, your metacarpals, your phalanges. Your phalanges are proximal phalange, intermediate phalange, and distal phalange. All of them have that except for your thumb. Your thumb does not have an intermediate phalange, and that means that it only has a the proximal phalange and the distal phalange. So again, let's go over that just in case you didn't see. We have the humerus, we have the radius, the ulna, the carpals, not metacarpals, the carpals, the metacarpals, and the phalanges. So let's move on to, we're moving downwards. Let's move on to the pelvis. So in the pelvis, you have the sacrum, which I'll turn it around later so you can see. The coccyx, which is just this little tiny little thing on the edge, like your tailbone. You have the ilium, which is this huge section right here. Then when you're going down, this is your pubis. So your pubis is connected to the ilium, but if we turn it around, so let's turn him around, you have your sacrum, your coccyx, you have your ischium. Your ischium is down here. It's not the same as your pubis. Your pubis is in the front. So this is your ischium. So let's move on to the leg. So for the leg, you have your femur, which is a large bone right here. And you have 2 of these, one on each side. You have, his leg is twisted. Let's pull you down so you can see him. You have your patella, which you have on both legs. you have your tibia, which is the larger one, and your fibula. Fibula, tibia, fibula, tibia. Then you have your tarsals of your foot, your calcaneus, which is your heel bone, and your metatarsals, and then your phalanges, which again, your you have a proximal and a distal and intermediate, but your big toe does not have an intermediate. It only has a proximal and a distal. And so let's move on to the skull. But first, let's do a quick review just to make sure that we covered everything. So again, you have let me hold it. You have 2 clavicles, 1 sternum, 12 ribs on each side, and then again 12 over here. 1 through 7 are true ribs, 8 through 12 are false ribs, and 11 and 12 are floating ribs. Then you have on the back, you have your scapula, you have your atlas, your axis, your C3, C4, C5, C6, C7. Then we have your thoracic, and then if we put it down, let me turn it around. You have 12 thoracic, and you have 5 lumbar. And from the back, when you're looking at the pelvis, you have your ilium and your ischium. Your ischium's down here, your sacrum, and your coccyx. And then if we turn them around again, she's gonna get dizzy. You have your pubis, which you can see right here. And then in your arms, you have your humerus, you have your radius on the same side as your thumb, your ulna on the same side as your pinky, you have your carpals, you have your metacarpals, you have your phalanges. Your phalanges proximal, intermediate, and distal, all except for your thumb, which only has the proximal and the distal. And then you have the femur bone, the patella on both sides. Again, femur and patella on both sides. You have your tibia, your fibula, your calcaneus, heel bone, your tarsals, your metatarsals, and your phalanges, which is proximal, intermediate, and distal, except for your big toe. Okay, so the last thing to go over is the skull. So let's move him out of the way. Okay, so for the skull, you have a good amount of bones. Let's sit down. So on the top here, this is your frontal bone. This is your nasal. This is in here, this plate right here. That's your perpendicular plate of the ethmoid. This is your vomer bone. And on the sides here, on both sides, you can see these little things that stick out. Those are your anterior nasal conchae. You have your maxilla, which your maxilla is split in half. So it's 2 bones fused together. You have your mandible. You have this little indent, the mental foramen. Then you have your, right here, your lacrimal bone. And then you have your parietal, which is on both sides of your skull, parietal bone. You have your temporal bone down here on the side. You have your occipital bone on the back, and you have your sphenoid. And then you have your mandible, again, your maxilla, your palatine, can't really get in there, but it's back here, and here, and here. And then, of course, again, your nasal, your lacrimal, which is right here in your eye socket, your vomer, and then your inferior nasal conchae. So for right now, that's all that I'm going to label in this video. That still leaves me to label the sphenoid, the ethmoid, and the hyoid, and with the ear bones, but I will name those in a later video.